The warm spring rain lashed against the windows of the train station as Emma Sullivan clutched her worn carpet bag, her heart a battlefield of humiliation and despair. The telegram that had arrived just 3 days prior still burned in her pocket. Marriage arrangement terminated. Stop. Return to point of origin immediately. Stop. After traveling nearly 1,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met, she now stood abandoned in Silver Creek, Colorado Territory, 1876, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a one-way ticket to nowhere. Emma wiped away a tear as she watched the station master lock the office door. Night was falling, and she had nowhere to go. The last train had departed hours ago, leaving her stranded until morning at the earliest. Her intended groom, a banker who had advertised for a mail-order bride in the Eastern papers, had taken one look at her plain face and unremarkable figure before declaring there had been a grave misunderstanding. "Miss, station's closing for the night," the station master called, his voice not unkind but firm. "Please, sir," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is there somewhere I might stay until morning?" The station master sighed, removing his spectacles to clean them on his vest. "Town's Inn is full up with the cattle buyers in from Denver, but—" He paused, considering. "The Ironsides ranch is just 3 miles west. Owner's a good man. Might have work for you, at least until the next eastbound train." Before Emma could respond, the station door swung open with a bang, bringing with it the scent of rain, leather, and horses. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the doorway, water dripping from his wide-brimmed hat. "Evening, Mr. Parsons," the newcomer called to the station master, his voice deep and rich as molasses. "Got that package from Denver?" "Just in time, Mr. Ironsides," the station master replied. Was about to lock up. The cowboy stepped into the light, and Emma felt her breath catch. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, landed on Emma, and something in them softened. "Who's this?" he asked, nodding toward her. "Mail-order bride," the station master explained. Fella took one look and sent her back. "Banker Edwards from over Silvertown way." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "Edwards? Man's a fool 10 times over." He turned to Emma, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that warmed her heart. "Name's Keith Ironsides, madam. I run the Ironsides spread west of here." Emma found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Emma Sullivan, Mr. Ironsides. Pleased to make your acquaintance." Keith studied her for a moment, taking in her simple dress, her hair escaping its pins after the long journey, the sadness in her eyes. Then, decisively, he stepped forward, set his package on the counter, and extended his hand to her. "Miss Sullivan," he said, his voice gentle but resolute. "I need a housekeeper at the ranch. Cook just left to marry her sweetheart in Denver. Job's yours if you want it. At least until you decide what's next." Emma stared at his outstretched hand, hardly daring to hope. I can cook, sir. And clean. I'm a hard worker." "Never doubted it for a minute," Keith replied with a small smile. The station master cleared his throat. "Good timing, Keith. I was just about to suggest she head your way." Keith nodded, then turned back to Emma. "It's settled then." He reached for her carpet bag. "May I?" Emma surrendered her bag, then hesitated. "Mr. Ironsides, I don't wish to impose—" "No imposition, Miss Sullivan," he interrupted gently. "I choose you." Those 3 simple words, spoken with such quiet certainty, made Emma's heart skip a beat. Not as a bride, not as a woman to be judged by her appearance, but as a person worthy of dignity and respect. "My wagon's out front," Keith continued. "We'd best get moving before this rain gets worse." Emma followed him out onto the covered porch of the station, watching as he secured her bag in the wagon. The rain had eased to a gentle patter, and the world smelled of wet earth and promise. "Up you go," Keith said, offering his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. His palm was calloused but warm against hers, and for the first time since receiving that devastating telegram, Emma felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not quite yet. But perhaps it was the possibility of hope, and for tonight, that would be enough. The journey to Ironsides Ranch passed mostly in silence, broken only by Keith pointing out landmarks in the moonlight that occasionally broke through the clouds. Emma found herself studying his profile when he wasn't looking the straight nose, the firm jaw covered in a day's stubble, the laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. "It's not much," Keith said as they crested a hill and a sprawling ranch came into view. "But it's home." To Emma, who had grown up in a crowded tenement in Boston, the ranch looked like paradise. A large two-story house stood proudly in the center, flanked by a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Lamplight shone from several windows, warm and inviting against the night. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Keith glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Most Eastern ladies find it too rustic." "I'm not most Eastern ladies, Mr. Ironsides." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, I don't believe you are, Miss Sullivan." As they pulled up to the house, the front door opened and a woman in her 60s emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're late, Keith. I was getting worried with this weather," she called, then paused when she spotted Emma. "And who might this be?" Keith helped Emma down from the wagon before answering. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Miss Emma Sullivan. She'll be taking over as housekeeper." "Miss Sullivan, this is Elena Rodriguez, our foreman's mother and the finest seamstress this side of the Mississippi." Mrs. Rodriguez's sharp eyes took in Emma's travel-worn appearance and the small carpet bag Keith was retrieving from the wagon. Her expression softened with understanding. "Another one of Edwards's girls?" she asked Keith quietly. He nodded, and Mrs. Rodriguez clicked her tongue in disapproval. "That man," she muttered, then stepped forward to take Emma's hand. "Come inside, dear. You look half frozen and wholly exhausted. I've kept supper warm." The interior of the ranch house was spacious yet cozy, with a large fireplace dominating the main room. Simple but well-crafted furniture filled the space, and kerosene lamps cast a golden glow over everything. It smelled of wood smoke, pine, and something delicious cooking. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Rodriguez urged, guiding Emma to a chair at the long dining table. "I'll fetch you a plate." Keith hung his hat and coat by the door. "I'll just check on things in the barn, then join you ladies. Miguel should have everything settled, but with this weather—" "Go," Mrs. Rodriguez shooed him away. "We'll be fine." Once Keith had departed, Mrs. Rodriguez set a steaming plate of stew and fresh bread in front of Emma. "Eat," she commanded gently. "Then we'll talk." Emma hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite passed her lips. The stew was rich and flavorful, the bread still warm from the oven. "Thank you," she said between mouthfuls. "This is wonderful." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, pleased. "Can you cook, child?" "Yes, madam. Nothing fancy, but I kept house for my father and brothers after mother passed." "Good, good. Keith needs someone who can manage this house. He's a fine man, but he works too hard." She paused, studying Emma. "You're not what I expected." Emma set down her spoon. "What did you expect?" "The girls Edwards rejects are usually flamboyant. Too pretty for their own good, or too aware of it." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes were kind. "You're different, solid. There's something in your eyes that speaks of strength." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just plain, Mrs. Rodriguez. That's why Mr. Edwards sent me back." The older woman snorted. "Plain? Child, there's nothing plain about a face with such kindness in it. Besides, beauty fades, but character endures. Keith knows this better than most. Before Emma could respond, the door opened and Keith returned, bringing with him the scent of rain and horses. "Everything all right at the barn?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. "Fine." Miguel had it all in hand. Keith took a seat across from Emma. "How's the stew?" "Delicious," Emma replied. "Mrs. Rodriguez is a wonderful cook." "That she is," Keith agreed with a warm smile for the older woman. "Though she claims she's getting too old to manage the cooking and the mending." "Because I am," Mrs. Rodriguez retorted. "My eyes aren't what they used to be, and these old hands prefer needle and thread to potato peeling." Keith turned to Emma. "The job is straightforward enough. Cooking for me and the hands, usually about 8 men, keeping the house in order, laundry when needed, though Mrs. Rodriguez helps with the mending. Sundays are yours, and you'll have your own room with a door that locks." His eyes held hers steadily. "You'll be treated with respect, Miss Sullivan. I give you my word on that." Emma felt a lump form in her throat at his earnestness. "Thank you, Mr. Ironsides. I'll work hard, I promise." "I know you will." He glanced at Mrs. Rodriguez. "Would you mind showing Miss Sullivan to the housekeeper's room? She must be tired after her journey." "Of course." Mrs. Rodriguez stood. "Come, dear, let's get you settled." The housekeeper's room was small but comfortable, with a single bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that would offer a view of the mountains come morning. A colorful quilt covered the bed, and fresh flowers stood in a simple vase on the dresser. "The flowers are a nice touch," Emma remarked, setting her carpetbag on the bed. "Keith's doing," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a knowing smile. "He always makes sure there are fresh flowers for new arrivals. Says it makes the place feel more like home." Emma touched a delicate petal. "That's very thoughtful." "That's Keith," Mrs. Rodriguez replied simply. "Now, get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Emma unpacked her meager belongings and changed into her nightgown. As she braided her hair for sleep, she found herself wondering about the enigmatic rancher who had offered her sanctuary when she needed it most. There was kindness in his eyes, yes, but also something else, a shadow perhaps, or a sorrow kept carefully hidden. Emma slipped beneath the quilt, surprised by its softness and warmth. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a gentle lullaby against the window. For the first time in days, she felt safe. And as sleep claimed her, Emma wondered if perhaps being returned to the station had not been a misfortune after all, but a stroke of unexpected luck. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sounds of a ranch coming to life. Emma dressed quickly in her simplest work dress, pinned her hair into a practical bun, and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth on her first day. To her surprise, Keith was already there, stoking the fire in the large cook stove. "Good morning, Miss Sullivan," he greeted her. "Sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," she replied, suddenly self-conscious. "You needn't have started the fire. That's my job now." Keith straightened, dusting his hands on his pants. "Force of habit. Been doing it myself since Mrs. Peterson left." He gestured to a pot of coffee already brewing on the stove. "Coffee's nearly ready. Ranch hands will be in for breakfast in about half an hour. They're simple men with simple tastes. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, if you're so inclined." Emma nodded, already rolling up her sleeves. "I can manage that." Keith watched her for a moment, then said, "I'll show you where everything is stored, then leave you to it. Unless you'd prefer I stay and help?" "I'm sure I can manage," Emma replied, touched by his consideration. "Though I wouldn't say no to that tour of the pantry." As Keith showed her around the kitchen, pointing out where various supplies were kept, Emma couldn't help but notice how at ease he seemed in this domestic space. Most men of her acquaintance would have considered kitchen work beneath them. "You seem very comfortable in a kitchen, Mr. Ironsides," she observed, as he showed her where the flour was stored. Keith smiled. a hint of self-deprecation in the expression. Necessity teaches many skills, Miss Sullivan. When you live alone as long as I have, you either learn to cook or resign yourself to a diet of burnt beans. And how long have you lived alone? The question slipped out before Emma could consider its propriety. Instead of taking offense, Keith merely considered her question thoughtfully. On my own since I was 16. Ran this ranch alone for the last 8 years, since my father passed. I'm sorry for your loss, Emma said sincerely. Thank you. Keith's expression softened. What about you, Miss Sullivan? What brought you west to marry a man you'd never met? Emma busied herself with gathering eggs from a basket, avoiding his gaze. After my father died last winter, there wasn't much left for me in Boston. My brothers have their own families. No room for a spinster sister. She paused, then added quietly, and I wanted a home of my own. Children, perhaps. A purpose beyond just existing. Keith was silent for a moment. Then, gently, he said, Edwards is a fool. A man looking for a wife should value character over appearance. Emma looked up, startled by his candor. You're very kind, Mr. Ironsides. Not kind, he corrected. Just honest. Now, I'll leave you to your work. I'll be in the east field with the men if you need anything. Mrs. Rodriguez usually comes by mid-morning. With that, he tipped his hat and left, leaving Emma with the curious sensation that something important had just transpired, though she couldn't quite name what it was. The next few weeks passed in a pleasant rhythm as Emma settled into life at Ironsides Ranch. She discovered she enjoyed the early mornings, the satisfaction of feeding hungry men who appreciated her cooking, and the quiet afternoons when the house was hers alone. Mrs. Rodriguez became a friend and mentor, teaching Emma the ways of Western housekeeping and sharing stories of the ranch's history. Keith remained a courteous employer, always polite but maintaining a certain distance. He ate his meals with the ranch hands, complimented her cooking, and occasionally stopped to chat when their paths crossed, but Emma sensed he was careful not to give any impression of impropriety. Still, she couldn't help but notice things about him, the way he always removed his hat when entering the house, how he knew each of his horses by name, the gentleness with which he treated the stray cat that had taken up residence in the barn. She noticed, too, that despite his success as a rancher, he lived simply, without ostentation or excess. One evening in late May, as Emma was hanging laundry to dry in the last of the day's sunshine, she spotted Keith returning from the fields alone, his horse walking at a leisurely pace. He looked tired but content, his face tilted toward the setting sun. He noticed her watching and changed direction, riding toward her instead of the barn. "Evening, Miss Sullivan," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. "Need a hand with that washing?" Emma smiled, surprised by the offer. "Thank you, but I'm nearly finished." Keith nodded, removing his hat and running a hand through his sun-streaked hair. "It's a fine evening." "Indeed it is," Emma agreed, pinning the last of the shirts to the line. "Mrs. Rodriguez tells me you've been expanding the herd." "Trying to," Keith confirmed. "Bought 20 head from a rancher heading back east. Good stock." He paused, then asked, "Have you thought any more about your plans, Miss Sullivan? It's been nearly a month now." The question caught Emma off guard. She hadn't, in fact, given much thought to leaving. The ranch had begun to feel like home, and the idea of departing brought an unexpected pang to her heart. I suppose I haven't," she admitted. "Are you unhappy with my work, Mr. Ironsides?" "Not at all," Keith hastened to assure her. "Quite the contrary. The men have never eaten so well, and the house hasn't been this organized since my mother was alive." He hesitated, then added, "I just wouldn't want you to feel trapped here when you came west seeking a husband and family." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "I've found the work satisfying, Mr. Ironsides, and the company pleasant." Something flickered in Keith's eyes, a warmth that made Emma's heart beat faster. But before he could respond, one of the ranch hands called from the bunkhouse, summoning Keith to settle a dispute. "Duty calls," Keith said with a rueful smile. "We'll continue this conversation another time, Miss Sullivan." As Emma watched him walk away, she realized with startling clarity that she was developing feelings for her employer, feelings that went well beyond gratitude or friendship. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Keith Ironsides was kind, honorable, and by all accounts, one of the most eligible bachelors in the territory. What would a man like that want with a plain, penniless woman who had already been rejected once? That night, as Emma prepared for bed, a knock came at her door. Opening it, she found Mrs. Rodriguez standing there, a knowing look in her eyes. "May I come in, dear?" the older woman asked. Emma stepped aside, curious. "Of course." Mrs. Rodriguez settled herself on the edge of Emma's bed. "I saw you and Keith talking by the washing line today." Emma busied herself with folding a shawl, avoiding the older woman's gaze. "Mr. Ironsides was just inquiring about my future plans." Mrs. Rodriguez's tone was skeptical. "And what did you tell him?" "That I find the work satisfying," Emma replied, her cheeks warming at the memory. Mrs. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. "You care for him, don't you?" Emma's hands stilled on the shawl. There seemed little point in denying what the perceptive older woman had already discerned. "I do," she admitted softly. "But it doesn't matter. He's my employer, nothing more." "Is that what you think?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, her voice gentle. "Child, I've known Keith Ironside since he was a boy. I've watched him grow into the man he is today. And in all that time, I've never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please don't. I couldn't bear to hope, only to be disappointed again." The older woman reached out to pat Emma's hand. "Hope is never wasted, my dear. Even when it doesn't bring exactly what we wished for, it keeps us looking forward." She rose to leave. "Just remember, Keith has his own wounds, his own fears. Be patient with him." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Emma found sleep elusive. Could the older woman be right? Did Keith see her as more than just an employee? And even if he did, what would that mean for her future? The next morning brought unseasonably heavy rain, keeping the ranch hands close to the bunkhouse and Keith confined to his office, where he spent the day catching up on correspondence and accounts. Emma busied herself with indoor chores, baking bread and pies, and starting a stew for supper. In the late afternoon, as the rain finally began to ease, a rider appeared in the ranch yard. From the kitchen window, Emma watched as Keith emerged from the house to greet the visitor, who handed him what appeared to be a telegram, before riding off again. Keith stood in the rain for a long moment, reading the message, his expression unreadable from this distance. Then, squaring his shoulders, he returned to the house. Emma was stirring the stew when Keith entered the kitchen, the telegram still clutched in his hand, water dripping from his hat and coat. "Mr. Ironsides," she greeted him, alarmed by the pallor of his face. "Is everything all right?" Keith removed his hat, running a hand through his damp hair. "It's my sister, Kathleen. She's ill typhoid fever. The doctor doesn't think—" His voice faltered. "I need to go to Denver immediately." "Of course," Emma said, setting aside the spoon. "When will you leave?" "Tonight, if the rain lets up enough. It's a 2-day ride, even pushing hard." Keith's eyes met hers, troubled and uncertain. "Miss Sullivan, I hate to ask, but could you manage things here while I'm gone? Miguel will handle the ranch work, but the house, the accounts—" "Consider it done," Emma assured him without hesitation. "Don't worry about anything here. Just focus on your sister." Relief washed over Keith's face. "Thank you. I don't know how long I'll be gone." "Take whatever time you need." Emma said gently. Your sister needs you. Keith nodded, his expression softening. You're a remarkable woman, Emma Sullivan. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a warm flutter through her chest. Go pack what you need, Mr. Ironsides. I'll prepare some food for your journey. As Keith turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. Keith, he said quietly, when we're alone, I'd like it if you called me Keith. Emma smiled, a small private smile. Keith, she repeated softly. He held her gaze for a moment longer, something unspoken passing between them, before nodding once and departing to prepare for his journey. The days following Keith's departure took on a different rhythm. Emma found herself not only managing the household, but also overseeing aspects of the ranch business that Keith had entrusted to her, paying the hands, ordering supplies, and keeping the account books updated. Mrs. Rodriguez provided guidance when needed, but largely left Emma to her own devices. Keith trusts you, the older woman explained, and so do I. A week passed, then two, with only a single telegram from Keith. Kathleen improving. Stop will return when able stop. Emma found herself missing him more than she would have thought possible. The house seemed emptier without his presence, the days longer without the prospect of seeing him return from the fields. In the evenings, after her work was done, Emma often sat on the porch, watching the sunset and wondering what Keith was doing in Denver. Was he sitting by his sister's bedside, walking the city streets? Had he perhaps reconnected with old friends, or even met a sophisticated city woman who captured his attention? The thought brought a pang of jealousy that Emma tried to dismiss. She had no claim on Keith Ironsides, no right to feel possessive of his attention or affection. As the third week of Keith's absence began, Emma received an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed man arrived in a smart buggy, introducing himself as Howard Edwards, the very banker who had rejected Emma as a bride. Miss Sullivan, he greeted her, hat in hand, as she met him on the porch. I'm pleased to see you looking well. Emma regarded him coolly. Mr. Edwards, what brings you to Ironsides Ranch? Edwards shifted uncomfortably under her steady gaze. I've come to offer an apology, Miss Sullivan. My behavior when we met was ungentlemanly. I've regretted it deeply. Have you? Emma asked, making no move to invite him inside. Indeed. Edwards stepped closer, lowering his voice. The truth is, Miss Sullivan, I made a grave error in judgment. I've since learned of your competence in managing this ranch in Ironside's absence. It speaks to qualities I failed to appreciate upon our first meeting. Emma raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting you wish to reconsider our arrangement, Mr. Edwards? I am, he confirmed, a self-satisfied smile spreading across his face. My offer of marriage stands, Miss Sullivan. You would have a comfortable life in Silvertown, certainly more refined than what a cattle ranch can offer. For a moment, Emma was speechless. Then, recovering her composure, she said, That's very generous of you, Mr. Edwards, but I must decline. Edwards' smile faltered. Miss Sullivan, perhaps you don't understand. I'm offering you respectability, security. I understand perfectly, Emma interrupted, a newfound confidence in her voice. You're offering to settle for me now that you've heard I'm useful. But you see, Mr. Edwards, I've discovered something important during my time here. I deserve more than to be settled for. I deserve to be chosen, from the very beginning, for exactly who I am. Edward's face darkened. You're refusing me? For what the hope that Ironsides might offer for you? A man who left you to manage his affairs while he gallivants in Denver? Emma's eyes flashed. Keith Ironsides is twice the man you are, Mr. Edwards. He's with his gravely ill sister, not gallivanting. And even if he never offers for me, I would rather remain his housekeeper than be your wife. You'll regret this decision, Miss Sullivan. Edwards warned, jamming his hat back on his head. I don't believe I will, Emma replied calmly. Good day, Mr. Edwards. As she watched him drive away, Emma felt a strange sense of liberation. She had stood her ground, spoken her truth, and in doing so, had discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. That evening, as Emma sat on the porch watching the first stars appear, she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Her heart leaped with hope, but she tempered her expectations. It could be anyone, a ranch hand returning late, a neighbor with a message. But as the rider came into view, illuminated by the lantern hanging from the porch, Emma recognized the broad shoulders and familiar posture of Keith Ironsides. She rose to her feet, hardly daring to believe he had returned at last. Keith! He dismounted smoothly, leading his horse toward her. In the lantern light, she could see he looked tired, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw, but his eyes brightened at the sight of her. Emma, he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. I've missed this place. How is your sister? Emma asked, stepping closer. Recovering, Keith replied, relief evident in his voice. The fever broke last week. She's weak, but the doctor says she'll make a full recovery with time and rest. Thank goodness, Emma said sincerely. Are you hungry? There's stew keeping warm on the stove. Keith smiled, the gesture transforming his weary face. Starving. Trail food gets tiresome after a while. As they walked into the house together, Keith asked, How have things been here? Any problems? Emma hesitated, unsure whether to mention Edwards's visit. The ranch has run smoothly. Mrs. Rodriguez and Miguel have been invaluable. And you? Keith stopped, turning to face her in the hallway. Emma, Mrs. Rodriguez wrote to me about how capably you've managed everything. She says you've won the respect of every hand on the place. Emma felt her cheeks warm at the praise. I only did what needed doing. You did far more than that. Keith's voice was soft but intense. You stepped into a role you never asked for, and by all accounts, you excelled. I enjoyed the responsibility, Emma admitted. It felt good to be trusted. Keith studied her face for a long moment. There's something different about you. Is there? Emma asked, suddenly self-conscious. You seem more confident. It suits you. Keith's gaze was admiring, making Emma's pulse quicken. Perhaps I am, she acknowledged. I've had some time to think while you were away about what I want from life. And what is that, Emma Sullivan? Keith asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I want to matter. I want purpose. I want... She faltered, then finished softly. I want to be truly seen, not just looked at. Something shifted in Keith's expression, a tenderness mingled with understanding. I see you, Emma. I've seen you from the moment you stood in that train station, dignity intact despite everything. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Keith, there's something I should tell you. Today, Mr. Edwards came to call. Keith's expression darkened. Edwards? What did he want? To renew his offer of marriage, Emma said, watching Keith's reaction carefully. He said he'd made a mistake in rejecting me. Keith's jaw tightened, his hands clenching at his sides. And what did you tell him? I told him no, Emma replied simply. I told him I deserved better than to be someone's second choice. The tension left Keith's body all at once, replaced by an expression Emma couldn't quite decipher. You do deserve better, he agreed softly. You deserve to be someone's only choice. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Finally, Keith said, I should see to my horse, then get some rest. It's been a long journey. Of course, Emma replied, trying to hide her disappointment. Good night, Keith. As she lay in bed that night, Emma replayed their conversation, analyzing every word, every look. There had been something in Keith's eyes when she mentioned Edwards's proposal: jealousy, perhaps, or possessiveness, and the way he'd looked at her when he said she deserved to be someone's only choice. Emma fell asleep still pondering these questions and dreamed of blue eyes and gentle hands. The next morning, Emma rose early to prepare a special breakfast to welcome Keith home. She was setting fresh baked biscuits on the table when he entered the kitchen, freshly shaved and looking more rested than the night before. "Something smells wonderful," he commented, his eyes appreciative as they took in the spread of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee. "I thought you might be ready for a proper meal after trail food," Emma explained, suddenly shy. "You thought right." Keith took his seat, waiting for Emma to join him before beginning to eat. It was a courtesy he always extended, treating her not as a servant but as an equal. They ate in companionable silence for a while, before Keith said, "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about wanting purpose." Emma looked up, curious. "Yes?" "I want you to know that I value your contribution here, Emma, not just as a housekeeper, but as—" he seemed to search for the right word. "As a partner, of sorts. In running this place." Emma's heart quickened. "Thank you, Keith. That means a great deal to me." Keith set down his coffee cup, his expression turning serious. "Which brings me to something I've been considering for some time now, even before I left for Denver." "Oh?" Emma tried to keep her voice steady. "I think," Keith began, but was interrupted by the arrival of Miguel, who burst into the kitchen with news of a cow stuck in mud down by the creek. Keith sighed, rising from his half-finished breakfast. "Duty calls. We'll continue this conversation later, Emma." But later proved elusive. The day brought one crisis after another: a broken fence in the north pasture, a dispute with a neighboring rancher over water rights, a horse with a stone bruise that needed tending. By supper time, Keith had barely set foot in the house, and Emma had resigned herself to waiting another day for whatever he had wanted to discuss. As she was preparing to serve the evening meal to the hands, Keith appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression determined. "Emma, would you walk with me after supper?" he asked without preamble. "There's something I need to show you." Curiosity piqued, Emma agreed. "Of course. Shall I meet you on the porch?" Keith nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Perfect." The evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Emma joined Keith on the porch as the last light faded from the sky, stars beginning to appear in the darkening blue. "This way," Keith said, offering his arm in a gentlemanly gesture that made Emma's heart flutter. He led her away from the house, past the barn and corrals, up a gentle slope to a spot where a single oak tree stood silhouetted against the sky. Beneath it sat a wooden bench that Emma had never noticed before. "This is my thinking spot," Keith explained as they reached the tree. "My father built this bench when I was a boy, said every man needs a place to sit and ponder life's big questions." Emma settled onto the bench, Keith beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "It's beautiful here," she observed, taking in the panoramic view of the ranch below, the distant mountains mere shadows against the horizon. "It is," Keith agreed. "I come here when I need clarity." He turned slightly to face her. "I came here the night before I left for Denver, thinking about you." Emma's breath caught. "About me?" Keith nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "About how in just a few short weeks, you'd become essential to this place, to me." He took a deep breath. "I've never been good with words, Emma. Actions come easier to me, but some things need saying." He reached for her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "When I found you at that train station, I didn't know what to expect. I just knew I couldn't leave you there, alone and heartbroken, because some fool couldn't see your worth." "You were very kind," Emma murmured. "Not kind," Keith corrected gently. Selfish, maybe, because from that first moment, there was something about you that called to me. Something in your eyes, a strength, a dignity despite everything. Emma felt tears prickling behind her eyes. Keith, let me finish, he said softly. These past weeks without you, they've been the longest of my life. Sitting by Kathleen's bedside, I had plenty of time to think. And what I kept coming back to was you. Your smile. The way you hum when you think no one's listening. How you remember how each hand likes their eggs cooked. Keith shifted closer, his free hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. I realized something, Emma Sullivan. I realized that what started as an offer of employment has become something much more significant. At least, for me. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Keith must hear it. For me as well, she whispered. Joy bloomed in Keith's eyes. Really? Really? Emma confirmed, feeling suddenly brave. I think I've been falling in love with you since that night at the train station, when you looked at me, really looked at me and said, I choose you. I meant it then, Keith said, his voice husky with emotion. And I mean it even more now. I choose you, Emma Sullivan. Not because you're beautiful, though you are to me. Not because you're an excellent cook or housekeeper, though you excel at both. But because you're you. Strong, compassionate, intelligent, brave. He released her hand only to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that gleamed in the starlight. A ring simple but elegant, a single pearl set in gold. This was my mother's, Keith explained, his voice thick with emotion. She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman worthy of it, a woman I loved with my whole heart. Emma's eyes filled with tears as Keith slid from the bench to one knee before her. Emma Sullivan, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Not as a mail-order bride, not as a practical arrangement, but as a true partnership between two people who love and respect each other. For a moment, Emma couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Then, voice trembling with joy, she said, Yes, Keith Ironsides. Yes, I will marry you. Keith slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her into his arms. His lips found hers in a kiss that felt like coming home, like every promise ever made and kept. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, Keith rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Emma. I think I've loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that train station, trying so hard to be brave. And I love you, Emma replied, marveling at how natural the words felt, how right. For seeing me when no one else did. For choosing me, not despite my plainness, but because of who I am beneath it. Keith's arms tightened around her. There is nothing plain about you, Emma Ironsides. The name sent a thrill through her. Emma Ironsides, she repeated, testing the sound of it. I like that. So do I, Keith agreed, kissing her again, more deeply this time. Above them, stars wheeled in the vast Colorado sky, witnesses to a love that had begun with a simple act of kindness at a train station and would continue through all the years to come, a love built not on illusion or superficial attraction, but on the solid foundation of two souls who had recognized in each other exactly what they needed. And as they walked hand in hand back toward the house that would soon be their shared home, Emma thought that being returned to that station had been the greatest blessing of her life. For it had led her not to a marriage of convenience with a man who couldn't appreciate her worth, but to a love deeper and truer than any she could have imagined. A love that had begun with 7 simple words, spoken by a man who had seen beyond appearances to the person within. I choose you.